President Bola Tinubu is asking the media to criticize him and the government fairly. He said this at the ongoing editors conference in Abuja. The Minister of Defense has come to the defense of his men. He said all officers on duty has his support. Hello everyone, welcome to the program. This is Politics Today, live on Channels Television. I am Sean Wakimale here in Abuja. Let's get straight to it. First and foremost, let's get the reaction of the Minister of Defense, Mr. Badaru Abubakar, who says that the federal government will always protect officers of the Nigerian Armed Forces on official duty. He said he's at a press briefing to commence activities of the 2026 Armed Forces Remembrance Day at the National Defense College, Abuja. At the ministry, and he said at the ministry and at the armed forces, there will be protection for officers on lawful duty. Well, this is perhaps coming on the heels of the heated confrontation that we saw with an officer and the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike, yesterday. Take a listen to him.
Well, at the ministry and indeed the armed forces, I will always protect officers on local duty. So we are looking into the question and be rest assured if any officer on local duty be protected. I will not have anything to happen to him. Local duty, doing his job, and doing his job incredibly well.
Excited officers there clapping their hands in support of the statement of the minister. But that takes us to checking out some of your political roundup stories, and we'll come to feast on some of your major political stories in Nigeria today.
The Senate has approved President Bola Tinubu's request to raise 1.15 trillion naira in the domestic debt market as part of a borrowing program to finance the unfunded portion of the 2025 budget deficit. The approval followed the adoption of a report presented by the Senate Committee on Local and Foreign Debt during plenary. In its report, the committee noted that the 2025 Appropriation Act provides for a total expenditure of 59.99 trillion naira, representing an increase of 5.25 trillion naira over the 54.74 trillion naira initially proposed by the executive. The leader of the Senate, Senator Kwemi Bamidele, has dismissed reports suggesting an attempt to remove the Senate President, Senator Godswill Akpabio, from office, describing them as misleading and aimed at creating unnecessary confusion and tension within the National Assembly. During plenary, the Senate leader clarified that there had been no discussion or contemplation among senators regarding Akpabio's removal. The Oyo State Governor, Seyi Makinde, has inaugurated the newly completed Ibadan Central Bus Terminal at Iwo Road. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo, who was a special guest of honor at the inauguration, applauds the project, which marked the formal opening of one of Oyo State's flagship transport infrastructure projects. Unveiling a commemorative plaque to inaugurate the terminal, Obasanjo commended Makinde and the people of Oyo State for their sustained commitment to infrastructural development. In Kogi State, the African Democratic Congress ADC has expressed optimism that the party will dislodge the ruling All Progressives Congress APC in the state and Nigeria in the 2027 general elections. The zonal national chairman of the party for the North Central, Mr. Tunde Ogbeha, stated this while addressing members of the party in Ayingba, the Kina local government area of Kogi State, during the unveiling of the party in Kogi East. He urged the members to unite and form a formidable force that will change the high level of poverty and suffering in the country. A group within the All Progressives Congress APC, under the auspices of the Wamban Shinkafi Democratic Front in Zamfara State, has endorsed President Bola Tinubu as its sole candidate for the 2027 presidential election. The founder of the group and the APC chieftain in Zamfara State, Sani Abdullahi Shinkafi, announced this during a stakeholders meeting in Gusau, the Zamfara State capital.
Thanks so much, everyone, for staying with us. There you have it. You've been served with your political roundup stories. So let's begin with the comments of President Bola Tinubu, who perhaps would be regarded as the very first sitting president to have attended a national conference of the Editors Forum, Editors Conference. Well, it was acknowledged as much as the conversation was around press freedom and how the media operates in Nigeria. When the president spoke, he was asking the media to criticize government policies with knowledge, fairness. That's what he told the editors. Take a listen to what the president said.
A democracy is sustained not only by elections and laws, but also by the integrity of the public conversation. This is where your role becomes central and indispensable as last man standing. As editors and managers of the national information space, you shape narratives, you influence public understanding, you decide what becomes national focus and how our collective challenges are interpreted. The weight of that responsibility is extremely significant. It must be exercised with wisdom, fairness, and a strong sense of national duty. Nigeria is a large, as you know, and diverse country. Debate and differences are part of our reality. However, disagreement must never translate into erosion of national cohesion. Criticism, when informed and constructive, is a service to the nation. But cynicism that breeds mistrust and despair can weaken the very foundation of the society we seek to improve.
Amidst all of these issues relating to perhaps how the government of the day is faring, not only whether the media is faring good under this administration in terms of the ability for the media to exercise its duty without being witch-hunted by the government of the day or being tracked, and issues relating to the balance of the thought across the nation, especially when there is now a global pressure on what the government of the day is doing in terms of security. I'm being joined tonight to take the conversation forward by Mr. Dairo Majid, who is a policy, governance, and political analyst who is live for us here in our studio. It's a pleasure having you join us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. You heard what the president said.
Yes.
And there was a lot of acknowledgement. These are the leaders of Nigeria's media outfits across the private and public sectors seated there, and you could see, and if you look at those who are around the president, you will see that a lot of them are being in the media and very senior members of the media, the likes of Bayo Ononuga, Dele Alake, and he's had very eminently senior people, like in fact, someone like you see Tunde Rahman, Sunday Dare, Tunde Rahman, who was working with the Punch at the time. Also, Toyin Zubar, who is also a media entrepreneur. He has around him a very strong media personalities. But then, would you say that that government understands media and perhaps the ability to be able to withstand what kind of pressure the media also could bring?
I think in terms of media management and relations, the Tinubu administration in about 2 years plus now in government has been an improvement upon the previous administration. I think they've been less confrontational. They have been more forthcoming with engagements, more forthcoming with collaborations. And if push comes to shove, they simply put out their own narrative there with those that are promoting such narratives to balance whatever it is that they consider to be too cynical or too critical of their policies and programs in the public space. So to that extent, as a media practitioner, I can attest to the fact that we have a little bit of more freedom to practice our profession. They've really relaxed some of the mercurial, if you like, draconian tendencies of trying to use state institutions, regulatory bodies, so like the NBC, actually stifle free speech. We've not experienced that so far. If you also observe, we've not seen the Minister for Information obsessed with trying to, should I say, regulate social media. In the past administration, it was a buzzword. For 8 years, they were preoccupied with efforts to regulate the use of social media, for instance. But under the current administration, we've not really had that. So I think so far so good. And the icing on the cake for me is the fact that the president, President Bola Tinubu, is the first sitting president, at least in the Fourth Republic, to have attended the Nigerian Guild of Editors conference.
In about 20 years or more.
In about 20 years or more. So that tells you the premium with which he holds the media, and it's quite commendable.
You look at Bola Tinubu and you say he has a lot of media expertise around him. But have they been able to utilize it as much as possible? Yes, there might be a tendency that there is an understanding that this was where a lot of them who surround him belong, and the fact that they need to also, now they are on the other side, they cannot stifle freedom of press, but the fact remains that public relations, management of information, you see what happened in the Trump situation. Has there been proactiveness rather than reactiveness that we have seen? How would you describe how they've been able to manage and package the government and Bola Tinubu as an entity?
Okay, the Minister for Information, Mohammed Malagi, who is a veteran public relations expert and a publisher in his own right, has been able to bring some sort of finesse, some sort of clarity, and non-combative approach, non-confrontational approach in communicating government positions. And to that extent, what he has done is that he's been able to admit sometimes when government may have not done certain things right, while taking criticisms as a form of feedback mechanism from the media and promising to do better. So to that extent, they've been able to somewhat douse tension. I knew what we went through, some of us went through in the last 8 years, when you had the government to contend with on every issue. I mean, it was as if the government was so obsessed by public opinions that everything was brought down, to make sure that people do not speak freely. I mean, there was another government that Twitter was banned in Nigeria, for instance. But the Minister of Information has done a lot. Yes, once in a while, we see some of the presidential aides, maybe out of personal loyalty to the president, going overboard sometimes to present certain positions. But I think the minister is trying, particularly in the case of the American and Trump Buhari recently about genocide and terrorism in Nigeria. We saw disparate tones come out of the presidency, but once the Minister of Information held that press conference and essentially committed that we've taken note of what our international friends and allies are saying, this is what we are doing so far. The government is not complicit in whatever killings that is going on in Nigeria, and we are doing our best while engaging with them to see whether we can have more collaborations to bring security to Nigeria once and for all, to end once and for all. So to that extent, I think he's been able to manage it properly. All I would say is that maybe if others can simply allow him to continue to manage the communication coming out of the government, I think it will be more tidy and better for the government and for the president himself.
In terms of diplomacy, that a lot of people are asking for, that this government needs to, in every channel possible, as country to country now, based on, because we've since not heard from Donald Trump, from all of those social media messages that he has released on how he's going about his so-called military intervention in the case of what is happening in Nigeria or what has happened in Nigeria. But in country to country and the manner in which things have gone over the last few weeks or days, how would you assess how this government had reacted? Were they panicky? Did they show you an initial panic? Well, did that help the cause?
I think it was a shock in the first place because nobody expected that the president of America will actually threaten a direct military intervention in Nigeria to put an end to terrorism, particularly as it concerns targeted killings of Christians. So I'm sure they quickly recovered from that, and the statement that came from the president eventually during the last fake meeting complemented what the Minister of Information had put out a few days earlier, which is to say, in summary, we have taken note of your concerns, we have been doing a lot to combat this same issue, and we are willing and ready to partner with you to put an end to this menace. That, for me, was also a very good statement coming out of the presidency. However, in terms of diplomatic engagements, I think this is not the best of times in terms of relationship between Nigeria and the United States of America. I say this because this is the first time since 1999 that an elected Nigerian president would not have had a one-on-one meeting with the President of America, either in Nigeria or in the White House. If you recall, the predecessors of this current president, within 1 year of the election as president, would have had that, meeting, because Nigeria is a major ally of the United States in the African continent. That hasn't happened. That means all is not so well between these two countries. And now, added to
Is
this,
it the countries or the leaders in terms of relationships?
The leaders represent the country.
Or the priorities the leader of our country pays to the interest of America and America's interest in Nigeria. And I give an example. The trips and the relationship with China, the trips and relationship with France, the trips and relationship with other countries, Brazil and all that, where some of these leaders have been met, or even the United Arab Emirates, or even Saudi Arabia. The leader of our country has met some of these leaders more than once in some cases.
Yes.
So you wonder whether or not our non-alignment, diplomatic, international policy or orientation has really been jettisoning or drowned to some kind of alignment with China, some other interests, or Brazil, or BRICS-related interests.
But I just think that given the importance of the United States to America, in terms of security cooperation, in terms of economic cooperation, one would have expected that the President of America would have extended an invitation to the leader of the largest or the most populous black country on the continent for a state visit, as used to be the tradition before now. That hasn't happened. Neither has Trump also visited Nigeria. If you recall that President Clinton visited Nigeria, President George Bush visited Nigeria, while Yar'Adua visited George Bush, I think within the first 6 months of his election as president. The same thing with President Goodluck Jonathan. In fact, President Buhari visited the White House before his cabinet was ready. So this shows that there is a gap. Now, for me, we need to reconstruct our relationship with the United States of America, as well as all other development partners, while sustaining our relationship with some other, I won't say rival powers, but some other alternate powers. But with regards to the current issue at hand, I think the president himself is the biggest solution to this problem. Because I've looked at other countries that have been placed on the list of particular concern. And I realized that there are some missing gaps that Nigeria does not really, that makes Nigeria not so qualified to be on that list. And what are those missing gaps? If you look at countries like Saudi Arabia, countries like Myanmar or Burma and China, they feature prominently on that list, along with Nigeria now. But in all of these 3 countries that I've mentioned, the central governments of these countries are actively, through policies, through programs, through even legal frameworks, violating religious freedoms. It's a state policy for these countries. In the case of China, for instance, the concern for the Americans has to do with the treatment of the Uyghur Muslim population of China and the obstruction of their rights to religious practice of the Islamic faith. In the case of Myanmar, for instance, it's the same thing. The persecution of the Muslim Rohingya population by the Burmese government is what has placed them on that list. And these 2 countries are not apologetic about it at all. Saudi Arabia is a mono-religious country that don't allow any other religion to exist. So, and they are comfortable with the designation because that is what it is. But in the case of Nigeria, President Tinubu as a president cannot by any stretch of imagination be accused of religious bigotry or having sympathy with Islamist jihadi terror groups. Absolutely not. You can criticize him for every other thing, but nobody can actually criticize him for this because he does not qualify for such criticism. So meaning that that alone is something to bargain to say, look, I'm the president of this country. I'm the commander-in-chief. There is no one can preside over a country and sit idly by and allow or encourage or aid and abet the killings of Christians in my country.
But could it also be, Mr. Dairo, that if you look at the combative nature of Donald Trump to leaders of countries that he perceived to have had some kind of
relationship with
rival powers, and maybe he doesn't really agree with them? And you can give two obvious examples. You saw what happened in the Oval Office. I mean, it wasn't the Oval Office. What he did with the Ukrainian president, and what happened with the South African president, and the altercations and the kind of confrontations that came. In the case of the Ukrainian president, even Vice President Vance was coming in, was interrupting, and they were literally subduing that man in his chair, in that sense, starting from how he was dressed and all whatnot. I mean, that alone will it encourage any leader of any country to even want to sit in any chair within the White House corridors?
Well, the difference here is that at least he has extended an invitation to the Ukrainian president and the South African president to come and discuss these issues. And if you look at Trump's position right now in the Ukraine-Russian war, despite his misgivings or prejudice against Mr. Zelensky, he's beginning to have an even-handed approach to that conflict. I mean, the recent sanctions against Russia and the threat to do much more appears to have been as a result of the diplomatic effort of Mr. Zelensky. If you look at the issue of South Africa as well, while it is not yet over, talks are ongoing. I'm saying we've not been given that opportunity. He has not given the opportunity to our president to sit down and have a talk about this matter. And I'm saying the president himself has done certain things that should break the ice. Apart from his personality, nobody can accuse him of being a religious bigot. There's some other thing he has done that he can leverage on. I'm aware, for instance, that in the course of his visit to the United Arab Emirates, a close ally of the United States, he was able to broker defense, armament, and procurement deals that has resulted into the restocking of military hardware and certain relevant equipment, if you like, that can be used to decisively deal with ISWAP. And ISWAP being the major culprit in the issue of targeted Christian killings in Nigeria, this clearly shows you that the president has taken certain steps to make sure that the armed forces are able to contain and defeat ISWAP once and for all. And thankfully, he had this arrangement with the UAE. So I'm saying, for instance, this is an evidence that he's doing so much, even though it has not yielded the necessary result, he's doing so much to defeat the very jihadi group that is mostly responsible for targeting Christians in Nigeria. So what does he have to do now? I think he needs to approach the United Arab Emirates authorities in this regard. Qatar has also been an ally of Nigeria, and the president has visited Qatar a couple of times, and they've had very useful bilateral discussions and agreements that borders on trade and security. So the Qataris also can be approached to mediate diplomatically between Nigeria and the White House, with the United Arab Emirates standing as a witness to the fact that the Tinubu administration in 2 years has done a lot with regards to the arrangement they have to combat terrorism in Nigeria. I want to believe that if this is communicated through friendly allies of the United States, such as the UAE and the Qatari authorities, it might melt the eyes of the White House and allow for a conversation that can result into a collaboration between Nigeria and the United States to put an end to terrorism in Nigeria once and for all. I believe that what Trump has done is a shock therapy to Nigeria to wake up. Wake up and understand that the world is watching, and we cannot continue to have these sick killings going on without bring it to an end. So
you heard
there's an opportunity in this challenge that must be combated.
You heard what Pastor Adeboye said.
I completely align with his opinion and his views on this matter. And I'm saying, without having any direct information about this, but you can see that there's a frustration between the White House and Aso Rock. And I'm saying they should approach the White House now through the UAE authorities, who can stand as witness to say this man has come here and we have had arrangements to enrich the stockpile of his armed forces to combat Israel, specifically. And the Qataris, also being a foreign nation, should broker that truce between the United States and Nigeria so that we can move forward on this matter.
There are those who are blaming President Bola Tinubu for a specific action that he has failed to do. Appointment of ambassadors. And the word on the street is that there are more people lobbying in the interest of what Donald Trump said as to genocidal claims on Christians in Nigeria. There are more people talking about, more Nigerians and more people in Washington, D.C. talking about it than Nigerians, those who are advocating on behalf of the Nigerian government. There is like a breakdown on Nigeria's government's own ability to have boots on the ground in terms of diplomatic mind to be able to avail the American government their own side of the story. And that those who say it's a failure on this side of on the part of that government and a great oversight.
It's a great oversight indeed. You see, in the global world today, in the contemporary world, diplomacy is the oil of national security and national economic development. Because the diplomatic outputs all over the world are essentially your marketing outputs. It's like these are your chief marketers of the economy and chief guarantors of your national security. So it's expected that as soon as the president is elected, within a few weeks or months of election, he must have sent ambassadors to our most important and critical diplomatic outposts overseas. That was definitely a major failure on the part of the government. However, I must say this too. You see, when we talk about lobbyists in the United States, talking about killing of Christians, we must not confuse certain things in order not to go into, should I say, diplomatic logjam in the long run. One thing is a reality in Nigeria. There are targeted killings of Christians. I can't say this enough. And no attempt, no effort should be made to deny it. There are. Now, the argument as to whether the killings have gotten or the numbers have risen to genocidal proportions is a matter of semantics. But one thing is clear. Genocide starts with one killing. One. Killing of one person. And genocide is always reported in the past tense, meaning sustained killing over time will satisfy the definition of genocide by all and sundry that are having conversations on this matter now. So what have we said in essence? One thing that is a fact between all parties is that there are targeted killings of Christians. I've heard the argument that Muslims are killed as well. And I say yes, Muslims are killed as well. But the jihadi groups that are killing Muslims because they do not consider those people to be Muslims. But the jihadi groups that are killing Christians actually kill them because they are Christians. This is the difference.
And we cannot deceive ourselves.
We shouldn't live in this denial at all. So it's not about going to counter lobbyists in Washington to say this is not happening.
It's how we deal with it.
It's to say that as a country, we have dedicated the largest land military operation since the Civil War to combat this menace. To show that we're making effort. It is to say that our president, for instance, cannot preside over the killings of Christians because he would have endangered his own wife and children. It is to say that, look, we have entered into agreements, we have sought help from our friendly country like the UAE, and they've given us some help to show that we are serious about combating it. Meaning that the government is not aiding and abetting it, unlike the case we have in Burma, where the government of Burma aided and abetted the killing of Rohingya Muslims, where the Chinese authorities are restricting religious freedoms for the Uyghur Muslim population of that country. Or where Saudi as a state policy do not allow any other religion to exist except Islam.
Right,
but in the case of Nigeria, the central government, is not in this category with other countries. So that can be leveraged on to say, look, we are willing to partner to do the needful. So appointing ambassadors is to simply go there and say, look, these things exist, but we need more help than we can get it now to put an end to this menace once and for all.
All right, give me a moment. We're going to break everyone, but when we return, there is another matter that is of concern, and this government needs to actually watch it. There's been a disastrous run in the implementation of the budget. Up next on the program, I will be joined also by Seun Onigbinde, co-founder of Budget, and we'll be talking about how it has been a messy implementation and execution of the budget. We'll be right back after this break, everyone. Join us again. Speaking with Majid Dahiru, who is a policy, governance, and political analyst here with us in our Abuja studio. But just for a moment, let me bring in a conversation that is concerning Nigeria's 2025 budget implementation under the Bola Tinubu administration. Questions are now being raised to the pace of capital releases, the widening fiscal deficit, and the government's growing dependence on borrowing to fund key projects. They've established in the budget that there is a deficit. Of course, there will be a way to fund it. Just earlier today, there is an approval by the Senate to the 1 trillion budget deficit funding through borrowing. Now, nearly a year into the budget cycle, analysts are expressing concern that there is a sluggish disbursement of funds which could slow down infrastructure delivery and affect the administration reform agenda. There are those who even worry about the capital implementation of the budget of 2024 dovetailing into 2025. We're just how many weeks into to the new year, yet we're still unclear as to the percentage of the implementation of the 2025 budget. It does look like things are really not shaping up in terms of budget implementation. Let me bring in Seun Onigbinde, who is a co-founder of Budget Foundation. Thank you so much, Seun, for joining us tonight on the program.
It's a pleasure being here today. Thank you so much.
This is beyond a Trump panic effect. But there is a problem in our budget implementation. The figures are not tallying. Things are not looking up at all. What are the figures saying? And why are we doing so badly in terms of budget implementation?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. And I think this is a very timely conversation, considering the fact that we do not even understand the number of projects being implemented currently by the current government. We had the 2023 budget and the 2023 supplementary budget extended to 2024. Then after a while, we saw that 2023 also, 2024 budget was also extended a little bit more. Now, we also heard that the 2025 budget capital component, the implementation just kicked off in October. I mean, the president signed the budget earlier in the year, I think around March, and we're now starting just capital budget implementation in October. Shows that there is gross disconnect. There is a challenge in the fiscal structure of the federal government. So as of now, we don't even have any budget implementation report of 2025 budget, and we are in the third quarter. So we are missing at least the Q1 and the Q2 budget implementation report of the federal government. When you dial that back and you look into what are the implications of this, number one, you do not even understand which project is being implemented and how significant that project is into national development. Because previously, if you have executed a budget at the end of the year, what you're supposed to do is to mop up the relevant items in that budget and present a supplementary budget. So you don't keep extending the budget life to another 18 months or another 12 months. It creates a huge level of distortion. So what we have seen currently is the budget now extended into 2025, and we're asking ourselves, when does 2025 budget, when does it begin? Why can't they have warehoused the most important budget project in 2024 budget, make it a supplementary budget, and add it to the 2025 budget so the 2025 budget can continue? As of now, this is November 12, 2025. We do not have the draft MTF document. We do not have the proposed budget. We do not even have it in front of FEC Talk less of that, the budget will now be presented to the president. So when you look at it evidently, it shows like we are highly unserious, about the progress, about the fiscal progress of this country. And my challenge is also that it's just a lack of coordination. Because all of this rest on the table of the president. There seems to be a disconnect between the budget office, the Ministry of Budget and National Planning, and the Ministry of Finance, so that they all follow the same pattern in the delivery of the budget. You have to give a little bit of kudos to former President Muhammadu Buhari. He instituted a framework that said the budget will begin by January 1 and end by December. Sometimes the budget was presented late, but they made sure that on the first day of the year, the budget was signed into law. This current government seems that they have broken that covenant, and what we have right now is that there seems to be no calendar to the national budget, which is really, really unfortunate.
When they got the baton, it was going to be a continuous effort to sustain. You remember prior to the coming of the Buhari government, and kudos also when you say there is a bit of a stabilization in the budget cycle, and in fact, was it under Okonjo-Iweala that we started seeing budget being presented in October for us to be able to actually have the document being scrutinized before the end of the year? We are in November. The budget has not come out. The National Assembly has not started of 2026. That those will even be asking the question, do we even need a 2026 budget, considering the performance of the 2024 and 2025 budget? But in terms of figures, let's be analytical. What are the figures saying? What was the performance, the percentage performance of 2024? What does it say? Where are we in 2025? What are the deficits in terms of the performance and the work being done?
I mean, like I said, the last figure we had was for the 2024 implementation report. And if you look into those figures, federal government had a target of 25 trillion naira in revenue. But those figures, they made around 21 trillion naira in revenue. So if you look clearly, federal government revenue jumped from 12.4 trillion in 2023 to 20.98 trillion in 2024. So there was nominally, there was around an 8 trillion naira jump in federal government revenue within a single year. Obviously, in 2025, we would expect that those numbers would be inching towards around 25 trillion. Let's not forget that the devaluation in 2023 gave an opportunity for the numbers to rise in 2024. But as you get that side of revenue, there's also the other side of things, which is the debt servicing cost. If we look deeply at the debt servicing cost of the federal government, it nearly doubled from 6.86 trillion to 12.36 trillion. So now, if you have a revenue of 20 trillion naira, and I think that's the problem of the federal government right now. You have a revenue in 2024 of 20 trillion naira. You use 12 trillion naira to service public debt. Obviously, you're going to pay salaries of around 6 trillion naira. Obviously, you're going to run what you call statutory transfers, National Assembly, NJC, and the rest, INEC, around another 2 trillion naira. So there's technically next to nothing left for you to implement capital expenditure unless you borrow. And I mean, a lot of Nigerians have been happy on the federal government continuous borrowing. It's just because the federal government, irrespective of how much numbers they are putting out there, do not still have the required resources to execute the scale of the budget that they put out there. So the federal government is still going to keep borrowing, except we forbid us go back to the days of President Muhammadu Buhari, where CBN, became like a buffer for all of these things. But right now, we are in a situation where the federal government still revenue, no matter how much exciting that it might look like, it still doesn't meet the quota. By the time you look at the capital expenditure for 2024, it was put around 6.4 trillion. So we budgeted 12 trillion naira for capital expenditure in 2024, and we used 6 trillion naira. So it was a 50% capital expenditure performance in 2024. And don't forget that capital expenditure performance extended up to 2025. So if that's even as of June 2025 is when we have spent 6 trillion. So you could technically say we have not even executed anything in 2025. So even if they bring the 2025 budget implementation report all you are going to see in that report is just recurrent expenditure and recurrent expenditure. We have not used that budget capital-wise, and which is an anomaly in how we currently run the budgeting system. And if somebody says, why do we need 2026 budget? This is a valid position, because if you have 2025 budgets, and you're just having capital component in October, why do you need a 2026 budget? But let's not forget that even if you start 2025 capital budget in October, the recurring side has been running since January, because salaries would not wait, overheads would not wait, statutory transfer payments would not wait, and other consolidated expenses would not wait. So it is the capital expenditure component that suffer. And there's also a pushback from the National Assembly in terms of a lot of constituency projects are not funded, and National Assembly is giving a pushback around this. But it's also something that has to come forward clearly, that National Assembly also has to reflect heavily on the insertions that they are making into the budgets. The federal government does not want to go back to the dark old days where the CBN was the piggy bank to fund capital expenditure. So it's very important that National Assembly also supports the executive in capital budget prioritization. If that does not happen, we'll keep having bloated capital budgets and we will not execute any, which is the situation where we have found ourselves now.
We've seen contractors throng the street of Abuja protesting of almost over a year of unpaid contracts that are being completed. But give me a moment, Shoni Mide and Majid Dairu. We're going to another break and we'll be right back, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone. Quickly, let's wrap up the program. Sean, where do we go from here? Is this situation rescuable?
Yeah, I mean, it's rescuable. The only thing is the political will has to come into play right now. The president has to show leadership and has to enforce some interagency coordination. And there has to be some ground rules. And our own approach as budget is simple. Not everything in the budget needs to be funded. A lot of things in the budget are not necessarily needed for national development. They are mainly extension of personal interest. So what the president should do is to set his priority right. If anything is within his priority and the resources do not back that up, make it into a supplementary budget and forward it to the next year. But this lopsided budget implementation is not helpful for national development in any way.
Thank you so much, Sean. Quickly, Mr. Dairu, your thoughts on this, a very brief one.
No, for me,
where do we go from here?
No, the challenge right now that we are faced with as a country should be converted to an opportunity to solve all of our existential problems, economic, social, security, once and for all. Because the kind of tantrums we've received from Mr. Donald Trump simply tells you that our status in the global space is not as high up there as it should be. So that should be a wake-up call, a shock therapy, to wake us all up from all of the issues we'll be discussing. And I hope that we'll get there someday.
Mr. Dairu, thanks so much indeed. Always a pleasure having you. Mr. Sean, the co-founder of Budget Foundation. Thanks so much indeed, gentlemen. That's our show for today, everyone. Many thanks for watching. I'm Sean Okimale. God bless Nigeria.